This issue that we have with God, I'm calling the silent treatment. Years of silence. Some say they pray and ask and hear nothing from God whatsoever, and they burn in indignation because He's silent to all of their asking. He said to ask and we would receive, knock and it would be opened, and to seek and we would find. But sometimes we've done those for days, months, and years, and we feel as though He shut the door, walked off, and left us in a silent room for good. Have you ever felt that way? In a marriage, it's absolutely maddening to be given the silent treatment. We want to discuss, work things out, but our spouse says nothing and goes on as if nothing happened. And it causes big issues that sometimes lead to divorce. Silent treatment in a marriage often reduces feelings of intimacy, and couples grow apart. Communication, we are taught, is a successful part of a union. God's silence often threatens to overwhelm us because we see Him in the same light as we see our spouse or a father when He's silent, and we feel as if He's not listening, doesn't care, or punishing us for something we did that we don't even know that we did. Think about when Jesus was hanging on the cross and He asked God why He had forsaken Him. Why do you think God didn't swoop down and rescue His Son from death? Remember, God had already told Jesus He was His Son in whom He was well pleased back when He was baptized. Now Jesus, hanging from death, can't even feel or hear His Father speak at a time when He feels like He needs Him and He feels forsaken. And yet we know that Jesus was in the perfect place He was supposed to be, sacrificing Himself for all of us so that we could live. In the Psalms, when David felt cut off or that God wasn't listening, he cried from the depths of his heart and told God honestly how he felt. Job, too, felt God had forsaken him in his years of sickness and loss as he prayed for help and heard nothing. Many examples are in the Bible of folks feeling forsaken and thinking God wasn't listening to them, and they bare their souls and lament over their plight, and yet nothing changes and they grow weary in waiting. Here are a few practical productions that can come from seasons of silence. It pushes us into His Word where He is anything but silent. The Word screams and teaches and woos and delights us with the character of the God we serve, and it's never silent. It's always powerful and more than enough. It pushes us to reach out beyond ourselves into quiet time for others and for community and fellowship from others, which we need, and we won't pursue that if it's just a me and God mentality. It pushes us to think about what voices we do listen to when they are spoken. It's a time to push out the lies and the deceit that has been swirling in favor of the truth and the peace that He gives in silent stillness. A time to sweep our spiritual house clean. It pushes us to lean in and to listen. Maybe He's speaking to us through a person, or that leaf that's blowing or falling from the tree, or that sunrise, or the wind that's blowing. We aren't used to noticing His silent movement because we always want the noise. But when the noise is gone and the eyes can see, we often see what we cannot hear. It pushes us into the student seat to be still and to wait and to learn and trust that the teacher is planning, brewing, writing, and preparing something life-giving and amazing if we wait for the instruction. Now open your books and let's begin. And then we hear again because we're now hungry for learning because we were without it for so long. It pushes us to dig our roots deeper, to go into the dark silence and reach until we find that water that will then be soaked up by our entire being and produce shoots up above in the light. It pushes us to notice today and do what we're doing today with gladness of heart. While we wait for the answer, we will take delight in the mundane, the reality of what's before us, and we can cultivate thanks in everything. And that's His will for all of us. It pushes us to either grow bitter or better during seasons of silence. We can wish we heard God like she did in Pine and Wine, or we can settle our hearts in the truth of the silence we're in as if it's a golden gift from above for today. We give others the silent treatment to set them straight, to punish them, and to effectively shut them out, to teach them a lesson. But we cannot translate our human reaction upon God, who is not human but rather divine, and He loves us beyond measure. James 1 says to consider it joy when trials come, and one of those trials could be a time of silence from the noise of asking and demanding. That same verse says perseverance and wisdom comes in the waiting, and when it comes, we will be complete, lacking nothing. In verse 13, it says, God doesn't tempt us to evil, so we know he's not like we are when we give the silent treatment. And verse 16 says he does not change like shifting shadows, in love with us one day and out of love with us the next. And in verse 27, we are told what true religion is, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep ourselves unspotted from the world. Are you in a season of silence? You could be in the exact spot you're supposed to be in, even though you feel like you're hanging from a tree. You could be poised to receive a huge dump of wisdom as you wait. And whatever the reason for the silent season, God has never abandoned you. He's not a God that abandons, but rather a God that completes. And while the completion is taking place, we live humbly, love others well, and keep our minds occupied with the truth of who he is.